right. Got some good news for you guys today. The end of year special is back. Remember, we were looking to grab that extra acre of land and be able to still provide that end of year special to you guys. And so that is exactly what has happened. But it still expires February 15th because we still have to make sure that we can go ahead and deliver on the bond ladder. Currently, things are looking good on that front. Let me give you a look. Let's see what we got here. All right, so just 1 second. The sticker's in the way. Oops, hard to move it too. All right, might just have to get rid of it. All right, so if you are on the TikTok stream, what you're looking at is the January bond auction. All right, remember we had looked at in December when the original end of year special was open before it sold out the first time. We were looking at those bonds, and we had what, a 12% and a 14%, I believe it was. Okay, so as we look at January's bonds, which are closed already, but as we look at the January auction, um, oh wait, no, they actually closed in a couple days. All right, sorry. But if we look at the January auction, we'll see that we have the first bond that was open. It has, let's see, a little less than 9 years left on it. And then the second bond that was reopened has just under 12 years on it. Remember the last two bonds, there was like a 25-year, and there was 21 years left on it, and then there was like a 20-year, and there was like 13 years left on it, right? So the the maturity date was a little better on those for our purposes anyway. And so these two bonds, one of them though is 15%, right? The highest bond in the last auction was 14%. So that's a good sign because remember, this is going to correct itself eventually, right? So one of the things that we're looking at this year is to get everybody in the bond ladder as quickly as possible before the bond coupon rates, which is the return on investment rates, go back down to like 7%, 8%, which is a normal bond rate percentage, right? Even lower than that possibly. Right now, still one of these bonds is 15.0390%, and the other one is 13.9420%, so almost 14%. So you get a 15 percenter and a 14 percenter that's available this month in this bond auction. So that's good. That the percentages went up from December, right? They didn't go down. So that's a good sign, for now. Bottom can fall out at any time, but that's a good sign for now. So those folks who did onboard in December and bought the end of year special, some of those folks are even getting their hands on this 13.9 percenter because it's over 10 years. Remember, we always target for 10 years. So there's over 10 years left on it. So this one falls within our target range. It's more than 10% return on investment, and it's longer than 10 years. All right, so the first bond in their ladder is already going to be above our target of 10%, 10 years. They're getting more than 10%, more than 10 years. All right. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So outside of that, everything else is essentially the same. Let me see if there's an amortization. I don't see one listed here. That doesn't mean that there isn't one though. I'd have to go into the second and third page of the prospectus to check. So that's where we are as far as the reopening. If you are on YouTube, it'll be difficult for you guys to see this. I might be able to though. Let me see. I might be able to put it up as a background, but as we know, on YouTube, it's not as clear to read as it is on TikTok. So if you're able to just head over to TikTok and check it out, do that. But I will green screen it here on the YouTube side. Where's the damn green screen? I forgot where it's at over here. Okay. Nope. Oh, it's there. All right, green screen. And the green screen is loading for you guys. Okay, there we go. So, it's not too bad. All right, so on the YouTube side, you can't see it as well as the TikTok side, but it is up in the back, so you can see that the two bonds in the January auction are actually slightly better in ROI, but not better in tenor, right? So the years to maturity are a lot less in both of these bonds. I think the larger bond is smaller than the smaller bond of the last auction, right? So we're not getting as many years in, but we're still over 10 on that larger bond. And we're getting over 10% ROI. So we're still good on that for now. Remember, that is not going to last forever. I can't say that enough, right? These are not normal bond interest rates, right? Bonds are, if you get a bond that's paying you 8%, you won. Like, bonds are not high interest rates because they're guaranteed return, right? The safer the investment, typically the lower the return on investment. The riskier the investment, the higher the return on investment. However, in this country, because they're doing so much infrastructure right now, right? This country is right on the cusp, leaving developing to developed, right? In the next 4 or 5 years, it'll be a fully developed nation. So because they're doing all their last minute infrastructure, all their, train stations and upgrading the airport and all that type of stuff, now the bond rates are amazing. Okay, so you're getting bond rates that are beating the S&P 500. Right? There's a 15% ROI right here, right? For you guys on the YouTube side, it's right here, right? 15%. That's beating the S&P 500. Over here, you got a 13.9420, right? Beating the S&P 500 with a bond, one of the safest bets you can make. Beating the S&P 500 on both of them, right? So beautiful, 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 beautiful bond work going on over here. Hey, how's it going, Lydia? We are reopened on the end of year special because we did pick up that additional acre for you guys. That means that there were 8 plots when we reopened. We sent out the email to all of the people on the email list, and within an hour, 4 of those 8 spots were gone. So there are only 4 plots left. It's been a great day. Happy New Year to you too. So only 4 spots left on end of year special. If I need to refresh you guys' memory on that, the end of year special includes full immigration servicing for one individual. If you're married, and we got to pay for the dependent pass and all of that, but full immigration servicing for one individual, a standard 50 by 100 plot of land by the beach, Indiana, actually greater than 1,600 square foot 2-bedroom home built from scratch, from new construction, built on that plot, obviously. Then the bond ladder comes with it, so that you have passive income of at least $50,000 a month for at least 10 years after you get here. So if you choose to just stop working and live off of that, you may. If you maintain some form of income, then it's just bonus cash. So all of that is included in the end of year special, as well as government compliance, tax compliance, and all of those things. So it is a full relocation package. It can be used for trust estates, And that is the other thing. There's a trust fund included that can manage the whole thing for you. It can be used for trust estates. We got those questions about like, hey, can I set up a trust estate using this end of year special? You can, because you get the trust and you get the estate. So if you want to set it up as a trust estate, you can. There's no additional cost to that because you're not doing anything extra within the special for that. It's just a small estate, but you can absolutely do that. Can you increase the amount of bond, income that you get? You absolutely can, right? You just have to pay. You just have to buy more bonds, right? So you can do all of those things. Can you increase the house? You can, but you have to pay, for all of those increases. The special is designed that we've priced everything out. So once you start changing things that are material changes, right? If you want to trust estate setup, that's not a material change. It costs you nothing. You can just do that. If you want a rancher instead of a 2-story, 2-bedroom, we've been able to figure out how to do that. So we can just do that at no increase in cost. Other than that, and we did that for a couple people who didn't want steps because of their age. There were some retirees who jumped on board and they didn't want to go up and down steps. So we figured that out. That's fine. So that's not a material change anymore since we figured out how to do it within the budget. And so that's cool. You can get a rancher instead of a 2-story. It'll just take up more footprint on the plot, right? So you won't have as much like backyard and front yard because now you're getting the same amount of space, but in a 1-story, so it's taking up more room. But that is neither here nor there. We can do that at no extra cost. But if you need more money coming in a month, or if you need some kind of add-on, or if you're trying to, we had one person upgrade to a smart house. Smart houses are always a significant upgrade. Always, right? So for an example, our base home is about 170,000, right? That base home, the smart version of that home is like 280,000 just to make it smart, but it's like completely smart. Like the TV follows you around on the glass walls. When you step up the steps light up as you walk. You can turn on everything by voice. It's Alexa is inside the building. And set up and all that. It's completely off grid. It's so it's a significant upgrade, but it's a significant upgrade. The cost increase is significant as well. So any of those things are possible, but your base package is designed to give you everything that you need. Maybe not everything that you want, but everything that you need in that base package. As far as you'll have your house, you'll have your land. You'll have your immigration, you'll have your bond ladder, you'll have your trust, right? So your cost of living is significantly reduced because you have the house, all right? That's a big deal as far as cost of living is concerned. I'm doing a good job. I appreciate that. Thank you. So that is what is included. In the end of year special, it is back for a limited time. It will close February 15th. A lot of you guys had kind of come on board and you got the contract and then you drug your feet. And so you missed out on the first one and it closed and it sold out and that was the end of it. You just missed it. If you still have your contract, which I think there's maybe only like one out there. Most of the people had their contracts already executed because they lost the first time. So if you still have your contracts, either one or two out there, then you can just execute that contract. If you got a contract, you also got an invoice, so you can execute that contract. You can go back to the invoice and pay the invoice, and then you're in. And then that's the end of that. If not, you need to book a meeting ASAP, or if you feel like you don't need the meeting, this makes sense to you, you want to do it, then you can email us and say that you want to do it, and then we'll start working with you there to see how we can draw a contract up and get that invoice out to you. But there are already half the plots are gone, so there's only floor plots left. And it's done February 15th. So if you were playing back in December and you lost out, stop playing, right? Get it done this time, because I'm not sure how long it's going to take. Yesterday we reopened it and half of them are gone. right? If you guys remember in December, we thought we weren't going to sell out until now, and we sold out before the end of the year. So, if you guys want to be part of the end of year special and get that killer deal, then you need to do it now. All right. Any questions on any of that? Any questions on the bond ladder? No, that's like the biggest question that we were having before. Any question on the bond ladder, how it works? I think you guys now being able to see from one month to another where we showcase last month's bond versus this month's bond. I think now you can kind of see how that works and understand. Let's see. Yeah. Right? Hello, how are you? Yeah, if you wanted to, as long as you maintain your budget, you could just move here and stop working for up to 10 years. Now, within that time, you should have it figured out, right? But for up to 10 years, you can on this particular package. And while the bond ladders are available, that's the whole point of the bond ladders. Yeah. I have no. I left America. I live in Kenya. I don't even know what's going on back there. Yeah. So with the target, it's like a minimum 50,000 a month. Yeah. Yeah. So it'd be 50,000 Kenyan shillings per month. If you don't own a home, then that's probably less than your monthly expenses. For someone who relocated, right? It's more than the average monthly expenses for a Kenyan. So there's that, right? But for relocatees that like are used to a certain lifestyle and are trying to maintain that lifestyle, if you have to pay rent, then that's not going to cover your budget. If you're not paying rent though, that can absolutely more than cover your lifestyle. Oh no, no, no problem. No, you're good. Yeah, so that's part of the whole key to the package is the whole fact that you have a house and it's fully paid off, and you don't have an electric bill. Well, you have an electric bill, but you don't have a water bill. You don't have a sewer bill. You don't have property tax because this land is agricultural land, so there is no property tax on it and all that stuff. So that's key to making the whole thing work. If you want more, yeah, I mean, if you want more, you can move up in increments as little as like $400 increments for however much more you want. But if you want, everything is times six though, because there's six bonds in a bond ladder. So even if you did want to do like a minimum, which you might see, I don't know, a minimum increment might change things by, let me think, maybe 5,000 shillings. So if you did the first minimum increment instead of 50,000, it'd be 55. If you did the next, then maybe it'd be 60, and so on and so forth. I'm trying to maintain that my math is right on. And well, and it would depend on the interest rate as well. So keeping with the minimum interest rate target, which is 10%, then yes, it would be 55, then 60, then 65, then 70, then da, 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 da. So they'd be pretty small increments, but you could increment it up. No, you forgot times six. It's six different bonds. So if you were only making one bond incrementally bigger, then you would only have a bigger paycheck for 2 months out of the year, because each bond pays twice a year. That's why you need six of them in order to get 12 monthly payments. Right. So it would be, if you wanted to double, it would be around 55,000 extra. And then you would get 100,000. No, it's not a stock, right? So your money doesn't disappear as soon as you buy it. You get your initial money back at the end of it. So you get your initial money back, because remember, when you're dealing with bonds, the government is allowing you to operate as a bank, and they borrow money from you at the interest rate agreed to in the prospectus, right? So you get all your money back at the end. Same like a bank. Like when you take a mortgage from the bank, they get all their money plus the interest. Now it's just a reversal. The government is allowing you to be the bank, so you get all your money plus the interest. No, it's not that. They're just different. It's not better than a stock. They're just different because a stock has a much greater upside, right? Like your interest can't go up. You have a locked in fixed rate, which when you're talking about like moving to a new country and not having a job and not working for the next 10 years, and like in those 10 years you'll get citizenship, so you'll get the right to work again if you want and all of that stuff. But when you're talking about that, you're not talking about like, oh, I'm gonna do a risky investment, I'm doing blue chips, I'm gonna get the biggest return on investment. That's not the mentality here, right? The mentality here is, am I safe and secure in my move, right? And so since that's the mentality versus, trying to make some big windfall on the stock market, a safer investment with a much higher return is where it's at, because you're trying to make sure that no matter what happens, you can live. Like you got grocery money, you got gas money, you got all of that, worked out. You're good to go, right? And so, so that's the purpose of this program and the bond ladder, right? The riskier the stock, the higher the reward possibility is, right? So the potential of reward increases with the drasticness of risk, right? So typically a bond is super low risk, so it's also super low reward. There have been times where the return on a bond is less than the return on a CD. So you were better off buying the CD than you were the bond, type of thing, right? But because of the situation that we're in with a developing nation, it just so happens that these returns on these bonds are actually outpacing the S&P 500. So now you're making like institutional grade investment returns, and you're still only dealing with a bond. Yeah, I mean, you can still go invest in whatever you want. So, like, if you are that level of investor and you're already doing risky investments as it stands now, just don't stop what you're doing. This is just not that. Right. It would just be extra money. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The vast majority of our bond ladder clients, period, um, keep some kind of additional income anyway, right? This just becomes their safety net. Can you get the bonds without the end of the year special? Yes, but then you're just not participating in the end of the year special. So you can do a bond ladder without the end of year special, um, and it'd be like 85,000 or something like that. And then with the end of year special, it's like 185. So you get the whole house, you get the land, you get the trust and all of that. So you're essentially buying an entire 1,600 square foot house for only $100,000. So yeah, by the beach at that. So yeah, pretty solid special. That's why it sold out so quick in December. Because we can't snap our fingers and convey land, right? The county has to change the title deed of the land from one owner to the other. So that's why it took so long to even come back with more land after it was sold out. Because we can even do a land deal, but it's going to take like 30 days to close. Very similar, actually, to the United States. If you've ever bought a house, it's the same thing. So maybe you've never bought a house since you asked that question. All right. Yeah. So yeah, if you've never gone through a house closing process, it's not, you don't snap your fingers and you have it the next day. It takes a while for that land to be conveyed over. And it was Christmas. So the people who have to sign off on that were on vacation. So always one of the hardest times to do anything that requires high level signatures, sign offs, and all of that stuff from the government. Always difficult to do in December because most people are on holiday vacation and they're out of the country when they go on their holiday vacation. So really, really difficult to do anything that requires government official signatures in Kenya in the month of December. Really, quite frankly, like once Thanksgiving hits, it's hit or miss up until around the 14th, and then once you start getting closer to the December holidays, whatever they might be for you, that's when people are like in Singapore and Dubai and like whatever with their families on vacation, taking their holiday vacation. But while they're doing that, you can't get the signatures that you need to get things done. So December always pushes everything back by like a month because a lot of times they'll be gone from like the 15th to the 15th. Like they'll just take their entire vacation over that holiday season. So a lot of them aren't even back yet. They're slowly coming back in the office now, but a lot of them still aren't back. We just lucked out. Right? And these are like the directors, you know what I mean? Like these aren't just government workers. These are like the heads of their departments. So they have like the most vacation time and all of that stuff. But there are certain things that still require their signature. Hmm. Oh, hey, Herzog. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, 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 yes. So if you were sent a contract for the end of year special in December, and then it closed before you could have your contract reviewed by like your legal team or whatever and have it sent back, the contract is still valid. It's still the same contract, right? So yes, if you were just about to send us that contract and pay the invoice and then we closed and we sold out, you are able to just go ahead and execute that contract, get it back to us notarized, and then go ahead and pay the invoice. And yes, there are 4 plots left. So, yeah, you can do that. You definitely can do that. You just got the yeah, no, we just sent out the email yesterday. And there are 4 people in your same position. They had their contracts already, but they dilly-dallied on them and they missed out in December and it closed before they could send their contracts back. Um, and the invoices, we closed the invoices just so that nobody paid by mistake and whatever. All those invoices are reopened. We just paused them. We didn't delete them. So all those invoices are reopened, and you can just send your notarized signed contract, and then you'll have one guaranteed to you. You're gonna go do that. Yeah, man, go do it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's like you. I remember you were calling us pretty, we sold out. We're sorry about that, but yeah, yeah. Your all your stuff is still valid. You can just sign your contract, send it. It's notarized. My bank notarizes documents for free, so I just went to. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, as long as it's notarized, you can send it back notarized. Needs a notarial certificate, um, and yeah, just then pay the invoice. As soon as you pay the invoice, it's locked in. It's yours. Yeah, it's literally across the street. So if you remember where the last property was, 15 minutes walk from the beach, 5 minutes drive from the beach, it's like that road that was in front of the first set of property is on the other side of the road, so everything is the same. It's still 15 minutes walk from the beach, still 5 minutes drive from the beach. It's literally the same area. That was just the stars coming together because typically we don't get land next to each other like that. Each project is in a slightly different area, but yeah, that was just the stars coming together. it's literally right across the street. You're still in the exact same area. Sometimes that's true. It has three roads bordering it, so we didn't lose a plot. Sometimes you're right. If because you got everybody has to have access to their land, right? So if you have one that's funky, where like let's say the land is shaped like a rectangle and there's only a road on this side of the land, then you might have to give up a plot of the 8 plots in an acre in order to create a road so everybody can get to their land. So yes, sometimes that is true, but this time we had it's a rectangle, but we have roads on 3 sides of the rectangle, so we didn't lose any of the plots. Who's that? Hey, is that Levi? Hey, Levi. So yeah, we didn't lose any of the plots, so we have all 8 plots. So and 4 of them are gone. Yeah, yeah, no, I got you, I got you 100%, man. All is good, my friend. Thank you for the heart meat. I appreciate that. No, Herzog, no, unfortunately, because by the time we get your account set up, this auction will be closed. So if you do go ahead and pay your invoice and all of that today, and you send back your contract today, then you might be able to get into the next auction. But we wouldn't be able to set up a central bank account for you, and your trust wouldn't be set up. Which the trust is the one who's going to get the bank account, right? So the trust wouldn't be set up in time for you to deal with these bonds. So if you onboard now, then either February or definitely March would be the earliest bonds that you could participate in. Yeah. Uh, Greetings over there on the YouTube side. Sorry, I didn't see that. I don't know how long that's been there. TikTok. You're from Kenya. That's awesome. Hmm. Yeah, no problem, Herzog, man. Yeah, not a problem at all. No, I mean shit happens, bro. I know we were expecting you, I guess like a week before, and you were waiting a week to do something with some money, and in that week it sold out. So like it happens. we and that's the thing, like we see this stuff all the time, but we're just not like pushy. It's to us, it's a red flag. Anyone's like pushy, 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 trying to make things happen, it's a red flag. So we let people kind of do what they want to do. We let them know like, hey, limited time, but then that's it. Like we don't keep pushing it. So I'm certain that's what happened with you as well. Yeah, McKenna did tell you. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's typically what we do. We're normally not into like pushing, 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 and we typically recommend that if anybody's working with someone who's pushing them, that's a red flag. Just walk away from that. So, you know. Okay, cool. Yeah, I can't check it while I'm on the live, but you should get a notification. You should actually get a notification directly from our bank. So if you went ahead and initiated that, you should have a notification from our bank. And then by our end of day, so while you're asleep, your blue account will be set up, and so you'll have direct access to the entire legal team and all that. So your account will be set up by the time you wake up, and the work will begin. So if that's the case, then there are only three. There are only three left. How does a bond ladder work? Okay, so the bond ladder, it works because there are six bonds. Every bond pays out twice a year, every 6 months. So the ladder is about strategically buying the bonds in such a way that you have January and July, and then you have February and August, right? And so by the end of the year, you have everything. So that's how the bonds work. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I just got the update, Herzog. So yeah, you're good. Your invoice just came in. So yeah, now there are only three left. There are officially only three left. Yeah, you weren't trying to miss it again, huh? Yeah, no, no. It is what it is. But we did get the additional plots yesterday, which are eight plots. We're already down to three left, so should sell out again soon. Maybe by the end of the week. So for the rest of you guys who were thinking about it and you hadn't done it yet, um, you don't want to wait too long. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's like you're good. So three left then. All right. No, these are the current bonds. So these are the new bonds. So anybody who onboarded, whether you onboarded just a bond ladder or you onboarded a what was that? Hold on 1 second. So that's the same question on TikTok. Any new interest rate? Hey, what's going on here? Any new interest rates for this year? Yeah, these are the new interest rates. So this is, but again, unless you onboarded last month or whatever, we wouldn't be able to open up an account for you quickly enough for you to take advantage of this. But this still shows you, how it works. So now these two bonds, one is 15%, 15.0390, and the other one is almost 14%. It's 13.9420, right? So these are the two latest bonds. Again, unless you already onboarded with us, we wouldn't be able to open up a central bank account for you quickly enough to get these. But if you've been watching and you keep seeing these incredible percentages every month and you haven't onboarded, you are not serious, right? Now you've seen at least, we've done this, at least 4 months now. So now you've seen at least 4 sets of interest rates. Our target has always been 10%. We've never changed that. Never once have you seen the interest rates get to actually 10%. So you all know that all of our clients are making more than promised. And so we always target 10 years. Here, one of these is below 10 years, so we wouldn't typically get it unless somebody orders us to, in which case they would waive the fact that it's under 10 years. But you see the other one there is just, oh no, not you particularly, Henrock. I'm just speaking in general. I don't think you've been here that long. There have been people who've been here for like 5 months, and they just keep looking at interest rates. um, but but the other one there is over 10 years, so that fits our target. So people who are onboarded and do not have their full bond ladder, and they don't have the maturities, so the months that this one matures, they don't already have a bond in those 2 months, are definitely getting that bond this month. Yeah. Now, you're actually within the range of normal, Henrock. You're within the range of normal because if memory serves, you've been around for like about 30 days. It normally takes people 60 days to pull the trigger. So you're definitely within the range of normal. What are the prices? The prices of what? The price of the end of year special, or the price of just a ladder, or what are you within the price? What prices are you asking for? Yeah, no, you're good, brother. You're good. There's a lot of unserious people that just kind of like to, I don't know, dream or something. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of that, and I don't have a problem with it. You know what I mean? I definitely don't have a problem with it, but it's unfortunately it's the reality of what's going on. So typically, like especially on the generational wealth side of things, for every like 100 people that express interest, 10 people actually set up generational wealth for their family. And then for every 10 who set up generational wealth for their family, 7 of them do not do the work necessary to pass on the education necessary to the next generation to maintain the generational wealth, so they become part of the statistic of 70% of all people who create generational wealth will lose it by the second generation, right? And so, it is what it is, unfortunately. The ladder. To do a bond ladder, just a ladder by itself. Well, bond ladders include immigration stuff, right? So to do a bond ladder, and then it includes an immigration permit, whether you want to come here or not. That immigration permit gives us like the equivalent of like a social security number, and like it's called a KRA pin and all of that other stuff that's needed to process you. So whether you use the permit and actually come here or not, you'll have a green card whether you use it or not. And so that whole process is $85,000. And then you'll have the bonds paying out every month. So if you're not using it to come here, then typically people use it to fund the generational wealth trust, right? Because then you have those bonds paying out every month. You could take the payout back in the United States, but there are tax implications to that. So there's that. You want to speak to your CPA before you do that. If you're looking at relocating here, which about 50% of our people are looking at relocating here, then it ends up that you can just quit your job and do it because the bonds will pay for everything. Now, if you're not building a house, then you may need more bond income. Getting more bond income is not the same as the original price to get the first ladder, because the original price to get the first ladder has all the lawyer fees and all of that included. Getting more bond income is strictly just buying a bond, right? So there are no additional lawyer fees or anything like that set up, or setting up your central bank account fee or anything like that. So the higher you go, like the less it costs essentially. It's essentially an economy of scale. So there's that. But yeah, that's how that works. So the end of the year special includes a house. It includes all of those things so that you don't have significant cost of life increase with an apartment and things of that nature, so that the basic bond payout can actually cover your monthly expenses, and then you're good to go on passive income. So how much you need to put down? No, they're bonds, they're government bonds. You can't put down. You got to buy them all. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't. There's no payment plan with the government. You have to either have to buy it or you don't. So yeah. So if you're doing the government bonds, then you just got to do them. You guys are killing me with the Bible thing. Man, every time I bring that up, people call me for days asking me what it was. I gotta look it up, man. I don't know it off the top of my head. Um, it was a wise man prepared an inheritance for his children's children. It's Proverbs 13:22. All right, it's Proverbs 13:22. I didn't know it existed until like my more religious clients like told us what they were. They were like, the Bible has ordered me to create generational wealth. We were like, what? What are you talking about? But yeah, it's in there. All right. Proverbs 13:22. Apparently. Right hand rock. I said that yesterday. So they must have been on yesterday's live, but they were like, "What? What chapter and verse?" I was like, "Jeez, guys, I don't." Let me look it up. The same way you can look it up. But the first time we heard that, we weren't sure what was going on. We were like, "Wait, is this like a fanatic? Is this person crazy? What's going on here?" God has ordered me to come to you and open up generational wealth for my grandkids, huh? But it turned out that and actually we got to be careful with that stuff, right? Because if it's obvious that the person lacks mental capacity, then we actually can't work with them. So we were like, what'd you say? But yeah, it turns out they were just referencing a Bible verse, which that's okay. No, people always ask that. I have no clue. I have no clue if there's an equivalent in the Torah. I have no clue if there's an equivalent in the Kabbalah, or the Quran. I don't know. All I know is that the clients who call from that perspective are always referencing Proverbs. So I don't know if there's a verse like that in the other like holy books. Actually, I do know there's a verse like that in the Tao Te Ching, which is the Taoist holy book, because Chinese clients will say that and they've told me what it is, and I have no idea how to do chapter and verse over there, but there is something in that spiritual book that says the same thing, except it's not children's children, it's like your children. So the Chinese normally put more money up front and make sure that their kids can benefit from the generational wealth. But there is something in their culture that says the same thing, which makes a lot of sense if you see how they operate. Yeah. You're for sure a big dreamer. I'm tempted to just use the HELOC loan that I have until I sell the property. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it's better to, well, I can't even say it's better because obviously it always depends on your individual circumstances, right? But from what we've seen in the past, there's a couple of different kind of loans. There's one called an HEI. You got to be careful because banks create all these products that sound like HEI to confuse you to do business with the bank. HEIs are not loans taken from banks. HEIs are loans taken from private equity firms that essentially buy a share in your home, right? Um, but you're selling, so that might not be, the best situation for you because you'd have to sell and then maybe pay it back out of the sale, which maybe makes sense for you or whatever. But for the HEIs, what a lot of people would get out of them is they would get all the money they need, but in HEI, you don't have to make any payments for 10 years. So in HEI, you get all the money and then you don't have to make any payments for 10 years. And then at the end of 10 years, you either pay it back or you give them the property. And so it's kind of like, the bond ladder. Like you get this, except it's a chunk of money. Whereas the bond ladder makes sure that you're good forever. You could screw up the HEI money because you just got a chunk of money and you could spend it in 3 months, So, but the HEI would give you like a chunk of money and then you have 10 years where you wouldn't have to pay it back. Obviously, if you sold the property, you have to pay them immediately because, the asset that they invested in is sold. But that is something, I don't know how quickly you can execute an HEI though, right? HELOC is definitely faster, especially if you already have it open. HELOC is definitely faster, but you're right. Interest is the pain in the ass on the HELOC. What a lot of other people do is if they have a Roth, they can pull out everything they paid into the Roth, no penalty, right? So the distributions, the money that it made is the penalty money, but the money you put in, because the Roth is after tax, the money you put in, you've already paid taxes on. You can pull all of the stuff you've already paid taxes on out, no penalty. Typically, speak to your people, but all of our people who have done that, if it's a Roth, not a traditional, if it's a Roth, they can typically just pull all that money out, and that's the end of that. So those are kind of been the ways that people pull out fast. We had 3 or 4 of those when this thing sold out in December. We had a couple people just pull all their Roth money out and do it that way. And then they had no penalty. We had a couple people just take the penalty because the penalty is 10%, right? So the penalty is 10%. Now, the other thing that you got to look at, though, is sometimes it changes your income. So your tax bracket might change. So you got to look at that, right? So you definitely speak to your people speak to your local people, right? But the penalty is 10%, and right. So we're looking at these two bonds right here. What the lowest one is 13.9, the highest one is 15. So if you're going to make 13.9% on the money annually and 15% on the money annually, is that more than 10%? Does that pay for your, you know what I'm saying? So some people are just like, screw it, because I don't have to pay the 10% until next year, right? Until when I do my taxes next year. So screw it, I'll take the money. I'll have a whole year to get the 10% together. I'll be making more than 10% on my bonds, and I'll turn around and I'll pay that. So I'll have a weak year with the bonds because I know I got that 10% coming. And then some people are like, payment plan, hello, I don't live in America anymore. You know what I mean? I just relocated with that money. So I'll contact the IRS, set up a payment plan. I'll pay that 10% over the next 5, 6, 7, 8, even 10 years, right? So all of those options are available, and that's the kind of brainstorming that like folks do, and then we kind of learn from them, because where there's a will, there's a way. So a lot of times they figure out ways to do things that we never even thought of, right? And so yeah, there's probably a way. If you sit down and think about it long enough, there's probably a way to get into it. HELOC is the easiest though, but yes, the interest is going to be there. If you're relocating, would you even well would you even have to pay that? You would, yes. I mean, it's still your debt. Since you walked away from the country, I don't know, but yes, it's still your debt. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that for sure. I hear that for sure. Yeah, man. Is somebody in the pipeline to buy? Like, do you have a buyer that's in the pipeline that you're just waiting for closing? Possibly, you'd have to speak to a local bankruptcy attorney about that. because you can't. What I know you can't do is you can't um, essentially take credit and immediately file bankruptcy, right? So there's still a certain amount of time, whether it's 3 months, whether it's 6 months, there's still a certain amount of time before that option is even on the table. So, but you got to speak to a local attorney about that, a local bankruptcy attorney. Don't just go to don't go to a divorce attorney. Go to a local bankruptcy attorney and talk to them about that. Yeah, but have you ever seen it happen? Yes, we have seen people do it. Not for this special, like this particular situation, but yes, we have seen people essentially finance their entire relocation and then file bankruptcy. But we didn't initiate that for them because we don't have local attorneys. Our attorneys are here in Kenya. So they had to go to their local attorneys and figure out what bankruptcy was going to look like for them and figure out whether it made sense to do that or not. But we've had quite a few clients do that. So yes, we've seen it done. Whether it's good for you or not, we have no idea. That's a discussion to have with that bankruptcy attorney, and that bankruptcy attorney should get really deep into your situation to be able to give you that answer. If you walk into the office and you're like, "Yeah, we can do it," go get another bankruptcy attorney. They should be looking at all your financials. They should be looking at your credit, history. They should be looking at everything, and then giving you like a path to whether or not that makes sense or not, and exactly which chapter makes sense for you. Because we have some people who've done what, chapter 6, some people have done chapter 7, some people have done chapter 11. So yeah. I never thought of that with the thinking emoji. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where there's a will, there's a way. Typically, you can figure out a way to do what you want to do. You just gotta, sit down and really take a look at it. And then you gotta always cross-reference all that stuff with your experts, right? So whether you have an expert or not, if you're looking at making a play like that, then you need to do a consultation or something and speak to a local expert. Just make sure it's the right one, right? So that you're not wasting consultation time or consultation money. Make sure that it's the right experts. Like, not all attorneys can answer that question, right? You need an attorney that specializes in that. Not all CPAs are going to be able to answer your tax questions. You need CPAs that specialize in wherever that tax question is, right? So if you're talking about removing money from a retirement plan, then you need, either a tax attorney, so they would be a JD who's also a CPA or an EA, or you might be needing to talk to like a securities attorney or whatever. But just make sure they specialize you're not talking to a real estate attorney about pulling money out of a 401k, right? So just because they're an attorney doesn't mean that they know what um, you need them to know to answer your question. Make sure you pick the right attorney. Or a tax professional, right? If it's a tax question, you could just deal with a CPA, but make sure it's a CPA that specializes in the type of taxes you're asking questions about. That's all. Do you often see CPAs that don't know what they're talking? Yeah, we do because we're overseas, right? So we do because a lot of our clients are asking about arm's length deals, and they're asking about like tax stuff that has to do with overseas, business and overseas money movement and all of that stuff. And so your guy who might be a CPA, but they've only ever worked for H&R Block, has no idea about international tax treaties and dual tax avoidance agreements and all of that stuff, and foreign earned income exclusions and all of that stuff. Like, they've never dealt with that. So yeah, we see it all the time because we're overseas. you know if you're just talking to people at your local barbershop, probably not. Like, if it's a bunch of people from the same county just getting their income tax return filed, then they probably have never met a CPA that didn't know how to do that. they probably are getting different levels of service though. Like they probably are getting different levels of savings and all that based on the skill of the CPA. But um, once you go overseas, there's going to be people who have no clue what you like. We had some folks that moved over here, and they had like I don't know, they had too much of a relationship with their CPA. It was a person who'd done their taxes forever. I think they go to church together and blah 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 blah, and they did not know what they needed to know to do international taxes. And they ended up telling them that they owe 10 grand. And I'm like, the government probably owes you 10 grand. Like, you need to speak with like we have an EA on this side. Like, you need to speak with our tax people because you have like $130,000 deduction right off the bat, that we know of, that we know that you qualify for because all of our other clients qualified for, right? So you need to speak to somebody about that. And they had another, what was it? They had another like 180,000 deduction, or possible deduction at least, that this person had no clue how to even look into. She didn't even know which IRS forms to file for that because she was just a regular, CPA who filed their regular taxes every year. But because she's the girly from the church and they're so wrapped in mixing business and pleasure, they paid the freaking IRS $10,000. They didn't have to pay them, rather than insult that relationship or whatever. So people are funny. People are funny. And then they ran into like, cash flow problems down the road. It's like, well, maybe that $10,000 would help. You know what I mean? But people make weird decisions. Our job's to give them the information to make the best decision they can possibly make, but they don't always make it. Yeah, that's crazy. I can never. I can never. Never would I give the government an extra $10,000 that I don't have to give them. But there's that thing, maybe she was I don't know, a deaconess in the church or something like that, and they didn't want to offend her or whatever. But she was not the right professional for them. So I don't know if they're going to go ahead and lose another $10,000 this year, or if they're finally going to use a real international CPA. So we'll see. They're supposed to be able to go back and amend, prior tax returns, so maybe they get that money back. But what a mess. Yeah, no, we see stuff like that all the time. People throw away money all the time. Hey, 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 what's going on, Book of Vibes? This is just these are the current bonds that are open. And then we were able to get an extra acre, so we got an extra 8 plots for the end of year that sold out in December. So we were able to reopen it. We reopened it yesterday with the new 8 plots. Today there are 3 plots left, so that's gonna sell out, and we don't have another acre that we can get, at least in that area. So we will sell out of the end of year special, probably long before the February 15th deadline. Um. Oh, okay. You guys be having me reading comments that don't have anything to do with what we're talking about. I appreciate them though. The positive ones, anyway. I probably look crazy though on the live streams that can see me sitting here reading for 30 seconds, and then I don't say anything because it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. What? Ooh, I have no idea what that says at all. I'm sure that was like talk to text or whatever. Just take a look at it and correct it and throw the comment back up. When do you get paid? You get paid twice a month. So the strategic nature of a bond ladder is to pick bonds in such a way that once you get to your final bond, those two payments a year every 6 months, are every month of the year, right? So if you have a bond that pays out in January, then it also pays out in July. If you have one that pays out in February, then it also pays out in August, right? So you just got to get that ladder set up so that every month of the year you're getting a payment. And I mean, unless you don't need it, we do have clients that have seen like really good bonds, but they double up on months that they are already getting bonds, but they have a brokerage account in the US or they have an investment account or a retirement account and it pays out in the missing month. So they don't care about not getting a check from the Kenyan government that month because they know they're going to get a check from the US government or from their US brokerage account, from their Social Security or whatever to cover it. So, different strokes for different folks. And sometimes it makes a hell of a lot of sense. Like when the 18.46% infrastructure bond dropped back in February, there were a lot of people who already had bonds that were going to hit. That was February, August, and there were a lot of people who already had bonds that would hit February, August, and they were like, "Oh hell no, that's almost 20% return on investment. Like I'll take that too." So it just depends on like how good the bond is. You might overlook the fact that it's not in the right strategic placement just because of how good it pays out. Milka,
Hi, good
how
morning.
are you?
I'm fine.
Excellent. Have a great day.
You too.
That's our social media manager. She's out there going to create content. You wouldn't see half the content you see if it wasn't for her. Mwene. Mwene. Is that a Meru name? Edwin Mwene? Yes, yes, yes. How much do they pay? They change every month. Our target is always 10% return on investment for at least 10 years. We've never, ever, ever hit that target. We've always been above it. Look at the bonds that are up right now on the screen. If you're following one of the live streams, we're live on 4 different streams. But if you're on one of the live streams where I could put the picture up and you can see it, look at them. Not a single one of them is at 10%. The tax is at 10%, withholding tax is 10%, but not a single one of them is at 10%, right? It's 15% and 13%. If you remember the ones I showed you for last month, it was 12% and 14%, right? And so we have not been in a situation yet where someone is actually making 10%. Even the net, like even after paying the taxes, we've not been in a situation where someone's actually paying 10% or getting paid 10%, rather. Sorry. So our targets are 10%, 10 years. The 10 years has happened frequently, but what they're getting paid is always over the 10% target. No, we don't really have anything planned per se. Traverse specializes in medical tourism, and they are really, really good at people who are getting apartments. We specialize in generational wealth, and we're really, really good at people who want to build houses. So, like, if I get a client who really wants an apartment in Nairobi, I'll just send them to Traverse. Like, we won't, give them substandard service, you know, by trying to do something that we don't specialize in. So, and then Traverse does the same thing. When somebody needs generational wealth, they send them to us, or when they need a house built. They do have a construction partner, but they can't match our prices because they have a big construction partner. Like their construction partner is like one of the biggest construction companies. in Kenya. So like your little house don't matter to them. Like they build like schools and government buildings and arenas and like so they don't care about your little 4 bedroom house. So they're not like giving you any kind of like significant discounts or anything like that. So sometimes that becomes a situation where they'll send somebody to us to build a house. So yeah, that's how we work together. There are big projects on both sides, where the founder of Traverse is looking to bring me on as like a board member on one of her big projects. I'm looking to bring her on as a board member on one of my big projects. So there are like big projects coming. They're not necessarily joint ventures. Um, we're doing a really cool um, like generational wealth apartment block project, so I can't get too deep into it, but what I can say is that the people who live there will actually gain equity on the market. Like that equity will be not private equity, it'll be public, traded on the stock market equity, that will grow every time they pay their rent. So they'll actually be gaining generational wealth just by paying their rent. So that's about as much as I can say about that project. And then she has a project coming. It's her projects, the founder of Traverse. So I'm not going to say anything about it, but she has a really really cool project coming, and its focus is on veterans. So that's all I'll say about that. And so there's those little things that are happening, that you might see us kind of both be a part of. We don't have a joint venture or anything happening just yet, but that may happen in the future. As far as like people from the diaspora are concerned, she's the only other relocation company that's like legit, like has her paperwork together, like is legit. There's a lot of people who decided that pretending to be a legitimate relocation company is the way that they'll fund themselves in living here, and they themselves are illegal, right? So there's a lot of wacky companies where like they don't have any permits. They're opening and operating illegal businesses. They don't have business permits, stuff like that, and they just don't know any better. And so that's kind of shady. Some of them don't even realize they're being shady because they have no business experience at all, and so they don't even know what business ethics are. And so there's that, and then other people are just straight up ripping people off. So that's the reason why you don't see us, like buddying up with other so-called relocation companies because most of them are fake, or worse, criminal. And so we don't want to be associated with anything like that. But Traverse is legit, 100% legit, and that's why we'll buddy up with her and we'll do stuff with her company because they're 100% legit. Nope, haven't even found one other legit company. Not in the diaspora, right? Like there are like European companies that focus on like Germans and stuff like that. Whatever. We don't really, and they're legit and whatever. But they're not other black diaspora companies because they always operate in their language. That's why. It's not because they're European per se, but it's because like the German ones operate in German. Their website is in German. They're advertised. That's probably why you've never even seen them. They advertise to Germans in German, and that's it. There's a Swedish one, but oddly enough, they also advertise in German. So I guess you know like maybe there's no Swiss language. I never thought about that before now. I guess there isn't a Swiss language, huh? So yeah, they advertise in German as well. There's a French one. They do the same thing. They advertise in French. Their website is in French, whole nine. So like that's how the Europeans get down. So that's why we don't really partner with many of them. And they're also typically generalists. They're not specialists. Kia is a specialist when it comes to medical tourism. Like Traverse Culture is a specialist at medical tourism. They specialize in cultural integration relocation, right? Whereas we specialize in generational wealth. We specialize in estate relocation, right? So we have different, specialities. Not other countries. No, our lawyers are only in Kenya. Generational wealth, we deal with other countries, right? So we set up like offshore trusts in the Seychelles. We set up offshore trusts in Mauritius. We set up offshore trusts in Hong Kong. We set up offshore trusts in and corporations. We do offshore companies and offshore trusts in all of those places as well. We also have set up offshore trusts in Belize, Nevis. Those are really expensive though, because their laws are designed to uh, essentially defraud creditors. um, um, we did British Virgin Islands a long time ago, but it's not as good as Singapore, and it costs more. So when people are at that level of asset protection, where they're dropping that kind of money for like trust, we never do BVI anymore. We just go straight to Singapore. So like that stuff, yes, because again, we're specialists in that, right? But as far as relocations, we don't have a law firm in any other African countries, so we don't relocate anybody to like Ghana, or definitely not countries that we don't consider to be good countries for relocation, like um, Tanzania. We would never recommend Tanzania to anybody. So, you know, stuff like that. Now, just because we would never recommend it doesn't mean it's not great for you. It might be awesome for you. And that's another thing with us as specialists, and not generalists will take anyone's money and do whatever anyone tells them to do. That's part of what makes them a generalist. Specialists will not take anyone's money, and we typically tell our clients what to do, right? So you go to a brain specialist. You can't walk into a brain specialist's office and be like, "Hey, I think I have a tumor. I'm gonna need you to schedule a surgery for Thursday, and get that tumor out because I pay you. So you do what I say." The customer's always right. That doesn't work with a specialist, right? That brain specialist will kick you out of their office, right? So when you go to a specialist, you go to the specialist and you say, "Hey, specialist, what's wrong?" And the specialist tells you, "I've done an MRI and I see that you have a tumor. I'm going to schedule a surgery for Thursday, and and we're going to move forward from there," right? So generalists, you tell them what to do, they say, "Yes, sir." Customer's always right. Specialists, they tell you what to do because they have specialized knowledge that you don't have, and that's why you come to them, right? Same thing with like going to college. You can't tell the college professor, "Well, I'm paying tuition, so I pay your salary, so you're going to do what no. You're going to do what the professor tells you to do, or he's going to kick you out of that college that you're paying for. Difference between a specialist and a generalist, right? So specialists tell you what to do. Um, Generalists, you tell them what to do, and they just do it, even if what they're doing hurts you. So there's plenty of times where we send people away, and we're like, "Listen, based on what it is that you're doing, this actually isn't the right country for you. Like, it's not the best country for you. There are better countries that'll give you better advantages for what it is you're looking to do. And so you should probably go and look into moving to this country instead, or moving to that country instead," right? So a specialist isn't just going to take your money, um, and keep it moving. Especially for us, like we're talking about these bond ladders. You know what I mean? Do you think we haven't done bond ladders? Do you think we're not getting paychecks every month, whether we have clients or not, for the next 10 years, just like y'all? You know what I mean? So for us as specialists and specializing in this thing in particular, where you get passive income, whether or not you get new customers, whether or not you go to work, whether or not you do, new business, you're getting monthly checks every month. That changes your perspective as well, as far as, "I just need this paycheck. I'm just going to take their money and and whatever. And even though I know it's not good for them, I need Papa needs a new pair of shoes." That whole thing. No, we don't. We're past that, right? So specialists, it's way better, to deal with a specialist for something like this than a generalist, in our opinion. So going to Kenya, I can buy bonds and make generational wealth. Yeah, I mean, you can buy bonds and make generational wealth anywhere. But Kenya happens to have a really, really solid bond market right now. So we have folks that just do their generational trust funds in Kenya, and then they do a bond ladder just to fund the generational wealth trust. They don't even come here, right? So that makes the compounding way faster because the government is paying the trust monthly because they have a bond ladder. So they can literally set that trust up and just walk away from it and forget it. And it will make more and more and more money every year and compound interest on that money every year while they're sleeping, essentially. And then when their kids are of age, their kids have multiple $1 million, sitting in Kenya, right? Because of that. Like the last person who did the bond ladder for the trust, they're projected to have 3.8 million US dollars in that trust at the end of 15 years. So, you know. So yeah, you can definitely do that kind of stuff. So your client and Traverse Cultures clients are vastly different. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. The least amount of money that you can use to buy a bond in Kenya is around $400. It's 50,000 Kenyan shillings. So on whatever given day with the exchange rate, whatever that 50,000 Kenyan shillings exchanges into is the least amount of money you can use. That won't necessarily help you on a ladder. Depending. If you're doing a generational wealth trust, you could buy a minimum ladder, right? So you can do a ladder where you did the minimum on all 6 bonds, right? 6 bonds in order to create a ladder. And then those 6 bonds would be paying every month. They might only be paying like, I don't know, like 1,000 shillings or something a month or something like that. But so what? It's generational wealth. You're having that money compound for the next 30 years to give it to your grandkids. So it doesn't actually matter how much it is. Okay, fine. That could work. But for the folks who want to like relocate here and then quit their job and live off the bond money, you cannot get a minimum bond and then expect that that little bit of money that you're getting off that minimum bond is going to pay all your bills and allow you to live. So for those people, the minimum amount that they would need in any bond is 1 million Kenyan shillings, because the other thing is called amortization, right? So when a bond amortizes, if you're under 1 million shillings, and some of the bonds, the language is a little murky. So sometimes it says 1 million or under, sometimes it says under 1 million. So we always get like 1 million and then that 50,000, to bump it up to just to make sure that the client is safe. But if you're under that amount, when amortization happens, they give you your money back, right? So when amortization happens, if you're under the million, like let's say you did 500,000, they'll just give you your 500,000 back. So you will make the ROI up until that point, but now you're out of the bond and there's nothing to be made anymore. If you're above amortization, they'll give you a piece of your money back, and the rest of the money stays in the bond until the end of the bond. So it depends on how you're using it. Bonds create monthly income. A bond pays out twice a month. Now, if you don't have a professional assisting you with the strategic bond ladder, you could buy 20 bonds and all 20 of those bonds could pay out in the exact same 2 months, right? So you could get 20 payments in January, 20 payments in July, and then that's it for the year, right? So that's not very efficient. So what you do when you're bond laddering is you stagger the 6 bonds. You pick bonds that pay out in January and July, and then February and August, and then March, and you follow, right? And so you pick bonds that stagger so that each time a bond pays out, it's a different month, and then you have monthly income for the year. And so that's how our bond ladder clients essentially just leave the United States, quit their job, and then have money coming in every month to live off of while they're here. So that's how that works. And then sometimes we have specials going on, like now, where the bond ladder is included, land is included at the beach in Diani, Kenya. A brand new house we build with our general contractor, a 1,600 square foot house, 2-bedroom, 2-story house. The trust fund is included, and the trust fund manages, all the bond payments and all of that stuff. So sometimes there's specials where we just wrap it all up, for people. There's only three of those left though, but sometimes you can catch us and there's a special that wraps it all together. We always do packages. The special is just at a special price, because if you've been following us and you're looking at our content, then you know that we spent over a month in China a couple months ago. And so we were able to do deals with the Chinese suppliers to get the prices down on the materials to build the house. So we were able to make this year's deal really, really good. But we've always packaged it where you can get everything, packaged together. It just typically costs double what the special costs. Why not the stock market? Because the stock market is volatile, right? So these are people who are moving to a new country. Depending on the type of permit that they move with, they can't work. And the permit that leads to dual citizenship is the permit that doesn't allow you to work. So a lot of our clients are on permits that don't allow them to work. And they need to make sure that they're going to be okay. So with a bond, it's way more certain. It's way more sure investment than a stock, right? And especially when you're in a market where, if you're looking at these particular two bonds for this month, both of those bonds are trading at better than the S&P 500. So if you're in a market where your bond income is actually better than, the 10%, 10.5% annual yield of the S&P 500, where you're doing, 15% on a bond, then you're crushing it essentially. Can you liquidate a bond? You can, but bonds are not designed to be liquidated. So when you liquidate a bond, you have to liquidate it on the secondary market. You typically lose money. None of our clients liquidate bonds because, again, the whole point of the whole point of the bonds in the relocation special is they're relocating and living off the money. The other people who buy bonds are buying bonds for generational wealth trust funds. So those bonds are being paid into the generational wealth trust fund, and then they have what's called a DRIP, a dividend reinvestment plan, and they, for whatever percentage. So it can be 100%, which means 100% of the money that comes into the trust gets reinvested. It can be 50%, whatever. So they'll create whatever DRIP they want the trust to do for their family's future, and they'll actually reinvest that money into other things, right? So we've had a bunch of special funds here in Kenya do over 20% annual return this last year. One of them did 60%, right? And so the special funds are doing really, really good as well. And so it just depends on why people are buying the bond ladder. If they're buying it for generational wealth, then they obviously don't want to liquidate it. If they're buying it to live off of while they're here, they want the security of getting a monthly payment for the next 10 to 20 years, even 30 years, depending on the bond that they get. So they're not trying to liquidate it. So if it's like a day trader, like who wants to buy a bond and then sell a bond and then trade it in the secondary market, that's not what bonds are designed for. So if somebody doing that and they want liquid, then they should invest in a stock or a REIT or something like that that's liquid, but not a bond. Bonds can be reliable. I have a land in Kenya. Since I'm a Kenyan working abroad, I can relocate. Yeah. We have a lot of clients. We have a lot of clients from Jersey City that are Kisii. We have a lot of clients from what is it? Is it Austin? Where is it in the Luyas in Texas? Was it Austin? Anyway, in Texas, there's a bunch of Luyas that are doing that same thing. In Seattle, there's a bunch of Kikuyus that we work with. So we work with a lot of Kenyans who are actually Kenyan, but they've been in America for a long time. And so they don't even know the Kenyan system anymore. And so we do a lot of that. Where they, especially if they already have land and stuff, then they can just build a house on that land and they can live off the bonds. So Yeah, definitely. You can relocate back. We also do a lot of Kenyans who they'll set up the trust. They'll fund the trust with the bond ladder, and then they'll send their kids to boarding schools like ISK and all of that, like really good boarding schools, just to make sure that their kids don't end up in like a school shooting in America or like some nonsense like that. And so their kids will come here, and then the trust handles all of that. And we have a corporate trustee that we refer to, but you can pick any trustee you want. You don't have to use our corporate trustee. And so the trust like picks them up at the airport, takes them to the dormitories, make sure they have food, make sure they have all their school fees are paid. Like all of that is paid by the trust, and all of that is paid out of the bond ladder, the payments that are coming out of the bond. So you can literally set up the bond ladder, send your kids to school, and never even worry about paying the school fees. It's like you pay them up front almost, and then when they're done with school, the bonds are still paying for 10 more years. You know what I mean? So definitely a solid situation for folks who want to just set it and forget it. That's essentially, what the bond setup is made for. So yeah, when it comes to Kenyans, those are the two that we're primarily doing. Also, Kenyans who have land here and they have kids who are American or British or whatever because they live abroad, they know that if they die, the fight for their land will get ugly, and their kids are not equipped to deal with it, right? And so some uncle, some cousin, even just a caretaker, right, who you hired to take care of your land, some of those fights, as you know, can get ugly enough where people try to take other people out, you know what I mean, to steal their land or whatever. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll do the trust with us. Their kids will be the beneficiary of the trust, and the land will be put in the trust. Then there's no fight whatsoever. It doesn't even go to probate because you never own the land. So when you die, there's nothing to go anywhere. There's nobody making any inheritance claims. There's nobody, saying that they're your child from when you used to live in Kenya. Like all kinds of crazy stuff comes up when they know that you've been abroad and they think you're rich because you live, in another country. And so we get a lot of Kenyans in the diaspora that come to us for that purpose also, to kind of safeguard the inheritance of their kids. So yeah, definitely work with a lot of Kenyans in the diaspora. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of coders and stuff. Most people keep their job even though they can walk away from it. So yeah. Do you register the bond with the SEC? No, because it's in Kenya. See how it says Central Bank of Kenya on the prospectus? So yeah, it's not an American bond. American bonds don't have 15% coupon rates, so you don't get paid 15% on an American bond. Well, no, that's an American thing. SEC is an American thing. Yeah, it's a department of government in America that governs securities. Do you own the bond? You can. You can own the bond directly if you want. That's a discussion that happens between like your tax people and our tax people and like our lawyers and your lawyers and blah 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 blah. Right. So that's a discussion that happens on that level. Typically, people though they open up their trust and the trust, owns the bond, and that's good too because you don't want a situation where like you get in a car accident and then you get sued and your insurance doesn't cover it all, and then the judge starts taking inventory of your assets, and one of your assets is this bond that's going to pay out monthly for the next 10 years, and then the judge orders you to like turn it over, right? If you don't own the bond and you're just a beneficiary of the trust, then you insulate those assets from that kind of collection. How is it registered in Kenya? I, it's a. I'm not sure I understand the question. It's a Kenyan bond, so it was issued by the government of Kenya, so that's why I'm not sure. What do you mean? Yeah, it's a Kenyan bond. So, oh, you mean like is there an equivalency to like an SEC type of thing over here? It's a government bond. So just like buying a U.S. savings bond, that's not registered either. Like you just go to the Treasury and buy the bond, right? And then you get the certificate. So this is a government bond. It's not a private company bond. It's not a corporate bond, right? So that's why it's safe. Like it's issued by the government of Kenya. So in order for the government to default on it, it would take an act of Congress or Parliament, as they call it here, or the government would have to no longer exist. In which case, you got bigger concerns than your bond payments, right? So it's a government bond, not a corporate bond. No, 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 no. Like, yes, your trust could issue a private bond, but that's a whole different, thing, right? But this is a government. These are government bonds issued by the government, paid by the government. And then the creme de la creme is when we get an infrastructure bond. There's no infrastructure bonds available this month, so you don't see them up there. But an infrastructure bond is tax exempt. So those are the beauties. There was only one last year. We'll see how many we get this year. But an infrastructure bond is issued by the government, completely tax exempt, so you don't pay the 10% withholding tax, and that's a beautiful thing. But yeah, no, the trust typically owns the bond, which helps the trust maintain what's called a non-grantor status. So if you're not the trustee, you can be the beneficiary, but if you're not the trustee, and the trustee is like a corporate trustee using your trust deed, so you still control what the trust can do, but you're not the trustee and you're not funding the trust from the U.S. The trust is funding itself from the Kenyan bonds, so it's not a U.S. asset. Then you can maintain a non-grantor position, right? So if you want to know more about that, just go to irs.gov and in the search bar type in non-grantor trust. But what it means is that you don't have any tax reporting requirements until the trust makes a distribution directly to the U.S. citizen, right? So then once that happens, then you would put on your, return, hey, I got this distribution, right? And there are ways like around that, not around reporting, but there are ways to like change the type of income and stuff like that, depending on what your personal situation is. So like your trust could own a company, the company could employ you to do certain work, and then you can get foreign earned income, right? Which foreign earned income that you're being paid is like a W-2 is tax exempt up to it's like 136,000 a year. This year it's 136,000. Last year it was 130, right? So it goes up every year with inflation. But if you're making foreign earned income, there's an exclusion that your first $130,000 of foreign earned income is tax exempt. But, right, if you're being paid from a local company, then there's local taxes, right? And so stuff like that. So it just depends on, what's going on with your own personal situation. So you have a foreign grant. So, okay, so if you have a grantor trust and you know all of those documents that you have to file every year, the FBAR, what is it? 3054A and all of that stuff. So there's like 4 or 5 forms that you have to file if you're a grantor, if you have a grantor trust with the U.S. government. If you have a non-grantor trust, you wouldn't be filing anything. So it just depends. It just depends on what your setup is like. And you have a bunch of trusts, so your local people would have to tell you what makes sense in your overall ecosystem. You know what I mean, as to what to do. Yeah, 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 yeah. There you go. Yeah, 39498. There you go. So yeah, yeah, we can get into a consultation and like get into your actual, your personal. There's a bunch of stuff. Like so, we have two people. This is a great example actually. We have two people that just came on board. The exact same identical thing that they both wanted. They both wanted turnkey Airbnb businesses out here. They both wanted a trust to manage it. They both wanted ladders to handle like payroll for the employees, so they're not going to have to deal with any runway expenses. The bond ladder is going to handle that, right? But when it came out in the end, they both had to structure it differently because of what they had going on back home. So one person had other Airbnbs back in the United States, right? And so they separated the two. They have their Airbnb LLCs and all that stuff in the United States doing what it's doing, and then they have their trust and that owns a company that owns their Airbnb, and they have a investor permit so that they can legally work in Kenya. And they separated them, right? And there's a non-grantor trust and their CPAs, and they have a tax attorney. All of those people have signed off. They're happy with the structure. It's going to work for what they already got going on back home. Hey, Wale. So the other person has a C corp back home, right? And so because they have a C corp back home, their C corp took 10% ownership in their local Kenyan company. Why did it do that? Because a C corp has something called a dividends received deduction, and it's 100% tax deduction, but only C corps can do it, right? So there's also the foreign dividends received deduction, right? And so what the law says is that if the C corp holds at least 10% of the equity units, because in an LLC it might be membership units, in a corporation it might be stock, blah 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 blah. So whatever the equity unit is, if you own 10% of the equity of that other company and they pay you a dividend, you can use a dividends received deduction of 100%, right? On those dividends. So you essentially get the dividends tax free, right? So for that other person, they're both doing the exact same business, but because of their personal setups, the one of them has a U.S. company owning their Kenyan company, and the other one has a offshore trust owning the Kenyan company, and it's completely separated from their U.S. business altogether, right? And they're doing the exact same thing. So your personal situation is definitely going to change how you engage, with these structures internationally, right? So the other person, they have the dividends being kicked up to their C corp, and all of those dividends are tax free, right? They're sort of getting tax free dividends on the U.S. side, okay? And then they have, they both have investor permits because they're both doing business in Kenya, right? So they both need an investor permit to legally do that. But anyone who's on the internet telling you like, oh, this is the way you set up this structure and this is the way you do it, they're just full of it, because it's going to change based on your personal circumstances at home, right? So definitely going to change based on your personal circumstances. Can I sell a business that has no business? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I think the answer is yes. There are things called shelf companies. Not shell companies, those are typically illegal. Shelf companies. A shelf company is a company that has been aged, so it's sitting on the shelf. So it's a business, it's a company, but it has no business, it has no clients. Sometimes it has like electric bills and stuff like that, or whatever, to kind of build maybe some corporate credit or something like that. But a shelf company is a company that is for sale, that has no business. So yeah, you can sell a business that has no business if that's what you're asking. It's typically a speculative activity, because you never know when they're going to sell, unless it's something which this is in a gray area as well. But like you'll have countries like Nevis where they'll do like shelf trust funds. And so the purpose of that is so that you can reactively get a trust fund, but that the trust fund has existed for 20 years, right? Because what ends up happening with trusts is that they need to be seasoned, right? So you need for the trust to be seasoned, that increases its ability to not be cracked open and not have that trust broken. So if you react to something by getting a trust, the trust is null and void essentially, right? The judge is going to do something called setting aside the trust, because it's new. You set up the trust in reaction to the problem. You're supposed to have the trust long before any problem happens. So there are certain countries that set up laws specifically to allow people to attempt to circumvent that. And Nevis is one of those countries. So, there's that kind of stuff. But that's really like shady business. I wouldn't get involved in it if I were you. I have 100 million bond. Can I transfer it to Kenya? Not really. Not really, because bonds are typically so a bond, when you have a bond, you're the bank and there's a debt holder, right? Now, can you sell the bond? Yeah, that's the whole secondary market thing, and you typically lose money on a secondary market, right? But now, can you transfer ownership to your Kenyan trust? Yes. Your Kenyan trust, well, I shouldn't even say yes, possibly, because there are certain countries where only citizens can own the bonds from those countries. So I shouldn't say yes because I don't know the specifics of your bond. It's possible that your Kenyan trust could own that bond. Why would you want to do that, right? Why would someone want their Kenyan generational wealth trust to own the bond instead of their, I don't know, asset protection trust in the British Virgin Islands or something, right? The number one reason is the first 10 million, now it's local currency, not $10 million, but the first 10 million that comes out of your Kenyan generational wealth trust is always tax exempt, right? So you get a buffer by being able to put something into the trust, but on the distribution side, you get the first 10 million tax exempt. Sometimes that can be the cornerstone of your planning, right? Especially if your Kenyan trust owns a Kenyan company, right? So the trust owns a company and you're working for that company, you may be able to set things up where, okay, the money is coming out of the trust, is being distributed from the trust to the company. The first 10 million is tax exempt, right? And then I'm making a wage, I'm making income while I'm in a foreign country from the foreign company, right? So from the US's perspective, that's foreign earned income exclusion, possibly, right? You got to speak to your own tax people about it. But that's possibly a foreign earned income exclusion event. So now the first $130,000 is excluded. $130,000 is more than 10 million local currency, right? So you can pay yourself the exact amount that's tax free from the trust and tax excluded from the USA, right? And then you just have to worry about whatever, minimal Kenyan taxes that you may have to pay, right? So figuring out those types of structures are sometimes what makes moves like that worthwhile. Sometimes you just got to look at it. It's just based on whatever your current situation is. What's a realistic amount of seasoned business you could? Well, no. I mean, so seasoning is for trusts, right? You can season a business too. If you season a business, it means that the business has business credit. But in the aspect that I was talking about, it's a trust, and it's a matter of the trust being legally solid, right? So, and it depends on the jurisdiction where the trust is, right? Most of the best jurisdictions have a 2-year seasoning. Kenya has a 2-year seasoning as well, right? So after 2 years, the trust is set. Now you're rock solid, or as rock solid as you can be. The other part of that is going to be, what does your trust deed look like, right? But your trust is legit, it's for real, and no judge is just going to set it aside now. Now the trust owns the things, whatever is in the trust, and you don't, right? But you can't get served a divorce and then move your marital property into a trust and think it's protected. The judge will undo that trust and rip that stuff right out of there, maybe even send you to jail for fraud, right? So it's a matter of making sure that you have your trust and everything set up before anything ever goes wrong, right? And make sure it's not reactionary to certain things. There's certain things that no matter how long it took for the thing to come to fruition, it's still considered reactionary. And engagement is one of those special circumstances. So if you get engaged and create a trust, and you're like, okay, I'm going to hold this engagement for 2 years so that I don't get married before the trust is seasoned, that doesn't work because it was reaction to the engagement. That's a special circumstance, right? Same thing with Medicare and stuff like that. Like if if there's a Medicare, Medicaid issue with a parent being put into an old folks home that you couldn't afford, and now they're coming to sell the house to pay for the old folks home. But you put that house in a trust, and it's been 2 years. They get a 5-year look back period, right? So that's another special circumstance, you know. So the earlier you can get your trust together, the better, because that's the more powerful that it is. Uh-oh, what do we got? Is the cost of living high in Kenya? Absolutely not. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can make it high. You can live the lifestyle you want to live, right? So you can make it as high as you want, but absolutely not. I have an entire family staff. I have maids. I have farmers. All kinds of stuff. I have security, the whole nine. And I spend, I don't know, 80,000 a month in Kenyan shillings. So like 750 bucks. You know what I mean? So no, not at all. Not at all. That doesn't include food and all of that stuff. I'm just saying, you know, we have a full-time living nanny, right? Like that alone, we got friends in California that have, well, they're full-time nannies, but they're working 40 hours a week. They're not full-time living. And so they have to have shifts, right? So they have, I think it's 2 full-time nannies for the week for first shift and second shift. And then they have like part-time nannies for the weekend that only work 12-hour shifts on the weekend, right? Which sucks for them because in California, anything over 8 hours in a day, they got to pay time and a half on. They're paying like $350,000 a year just for the nannies, right? It's crazy. So yeah, it's way 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 cheaper than U.S., U.K., Canada, any of that, and the technology level is on the same level. There's you have like your brownout stuff with like the power. It's not obviously we've been live. I'm on power. Nothing is brown out, right? It happens from time to time, though. But our clients that build houses with us don't even know it happens because they either have solar off-grid backup or they have a diesel backup generator. And so when everybody else is out of power, they don't even know that the power went out. The internet's the same as the United States. The medical is the same as the United States. So all of that, if not better, quite frankly. We had an issue when our son was being born that we don't think we would have got better treatment in the U.S. for, and we probably would have had a medical bankruptcy as a result of that treatment, where they actually brought in a geneticist and created a like retroviral treatment, like it was crazy, like a gene therapy on the spot, and like solved the problem, and our child was born just fine, completely healthy and completely developed, even though he was premature. They did like a gene therapy and like grew him in the womb to make sure that this emergency C-section they had to do wouldn't mess him up. And when I called back to my doctors in the U.S., they were like, "Oh, they're gonna have to use steroids. Your kid's definitely gonna have asthma. Watch their lungs. Lungs aren't gonna be developed." Da, 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 da. They did this gene therapy, fully developed lungs, no asthma. Like on my personal page, you can go see him running around and all that, swimming, all that. They were like, "Oh, he can't swim because lungs aren't gonna be." He's swimming, he's running, he's playing, and so those doctors that I was talking to from Philly, they actually made contact with the doctors in Kenya, right? And so now they're communicating, and so to a certain extent, maybe even better. So I mean, all of those are factors as to why, we chose the country that we did. The great trust laws. They're perpetual trusts. They're not like Singapore, where you get 100 years, or Dubai, it's even less than 100 years. I feel like it's 30 or something like that, or 28 or something weird like that. But they're perpetual trusts, so they're valid trusts for generational wealth. They last forever, and there's an incredible bond market right now, as you can see. So to get 15% on a bond, you're getting 5% more than the S&P 500 on historical average. So like that's crazy, right? You're crushing it with the safety of a government bond. That's not going to last forever, right? The bonds are going to go down to like the same rates as like U.S. savings bonds, right? This is not normal, right? This is because they're currently transitioning from third world to first world. They're currently transitioning from a developing nation to a fully developed nation, and that should be done in the next 5 years, right? So the bond rates are not going to last forever by any stretch of the imagination. They're building their first nuclear power plant right now, right? Third world countries don't have nuclear power plants, right? So like they're the things that happen to get you from developing nation to developed nation are happening right now, and that's why the bond rates are the way they are, and like the interest rates are the way they are, and you can really do well here in the moment, but that's it's not going to last forever. How do you switch from treasury bond to no. The treasury bond is the Kenyan bond. Yeah. So a treasury bond and a Kenyan bond are the same thing. There are corporate bonds, right? Like so one of the biggest companies in and they're not just big because they're the cell phone company, they're big because they invented the digital currency that is used, or the digital currency platform that is used in Kenya called M-Pesa. So everyone in Kenya uses a digital currency and they can use cash. And you can instantaneously withdraw your digital currency for cash. You can instantaneously walk up to like a street vendor and give them your cash and it goes right on your phone as digital currency. It's amazing, right? But they own that. So they're the cell phone provider. They do fiber optic cable for internet and all that. But their big thing is they own this digital currency, right? And so they were doing a green project. And so they submitted the green project to the Kenyan version of the SEC, eventually, essentially. And they got that project approved for tax exempt bonding. So they sell debt to the Kenyan people in the form of a bond. It's tax exempt. It was 10.5% coupon payment. So the interest that they're paying the people who bought the bond was 10.5%. It's already gone, by the way. And so that was a corporate bond, right? That had to be registered with the Kenyan version of the SEC, right? The treasury bonds are the Kenyan government Central Bank of Kenya bonds. They're different, right? So, but you have to have a bank account with the Central Bank of Kenya that gets set up by a professional. And then you can purchase bonds through that portal, right? So very similar to the U.S. system where you can just buy U.S. Savings bonds and all that type of stuff. Same type of thing, right? So the treasury bonds are the Kenyan bonds. There are corporate bonds that exist, but that's a whole different thing because a company can default. They're riskier. A company can go out of business and then they've essentially defaulted on that bond and the blah 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 blah, right? Typically they're supposed to have a surety bond with the state, but that may not even get you back your initial capital, right? Something should come back, but it is what it's just more risky. Your government bonds are definitely the safest asset category, but they're not liquid because they're bonds, right? And typically it's less reward because it's so safe, right? The only reason why these bonds are trading at such a high price is because of the development that's happening in the country. So there's a need for cash, and the government is loaning that cash from regular people. Can I special deposit a bond as collateral? Yes. Now I don't know with like the banks that you're dealing with. That's a great question. That's a question that only somebody who has dealt with bonds before would ask. But yes, in Kenya, there are multiple Kenyan banks that will take your bond as collateral and give you a loan. Yes. You got a good head on your shoulders. I see that you know generational wealth. But yes, you can do that. And if it's your trust that owns the bond, your trust can do that. I mean, so it's virtually any bank in Kenya. The big bank that came out and announced it recently was Cooperative Bank. Um, no, I'm sorry, Consolidated Bank. I'm sorry. We actually have a relationship with Consolidated Bank. We also have a relationship with NCBA. KCB, which is the bank that the government uses, they also have those options, but you can walk into any bank. It's just going to be like what rates they give you. You're going to want to shop around, right? So like the different rates that they give you for it and all of that stuff. It's the same thing as going from Wells Fargo to Bank of America to Citibank to whatever in the U.S. But it's not like a special investment bank that does it. Any bank will offer you something against your bonds, as long as the bond is like worth enough, right? They probably have different thresholds as well. It's like somebody who has a bond that's only worth 100,000 on the face value anyway, right? The face value of the bond. Um, there are some banks that probably won't touch that. It's probably not enough. Probably needs to be at least a half a million or whatever in local currency, right? So a half a million in local currency is like $4,000, right? So for offshore investors, things are very, very, very easy. Is that the coupons? Is that what you're saying? You have the coupons for your bonds? Oh, okay. Yeah. So here it'll be in your portal. It'll be like when you set up your account, you'll get an account number. The way that they do it here, you'll get an account number, and then there's an identifying number. You can actually see it up here. There's that number that says ISIN. So there's an identifying number to whichever bond that you got, and then you have a special account number, and then that's why all bonds are purchased through the portal. There's no way to like walk up to a counter in Kenya and like buy a bond like at a market. So like you can't go to like an exchange or a broker. Well, you can go to a broker, but you're just paying the broker extra money. You can go to the broker and all of that, but um, you won't get like a physical like bond certificate unless it's a corporate bond, then you will. So if there's a corporate bond, then you will have an identifiable number that's linked, especially if that bond is linked to a publicly traded stock corporation, so a public, corporation. But treasury bonds are not traded on the stock market, so here you wouldn't have that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The ISIN number is pretty standard. But corporate bonds, yes, they are going to be traded on the stock market. Well, at least the issuer is traded on the stock market. So then, yes. Hi, if the withholding tax is 10%, but the yield is below that, what's the point? The yield isn't below that. So I'm not sure. Right? Like our target yield is 10%, and no one has ever had a target of 10%. So, like, even in the prospectus that you're seeing for the bonds of this month, the lowest one is 13.942. And the 10% withholding tax is on the money you make, not on the face value of the bond. So you're getting 13% on whatever money you put into the bond. That 13% comes out, and then whatever that 13% is, that's what they're taking 10% of as a withholding tax, right? So they're not taxing you on the money that you paid in. You've already been taxed on that. That's your personal money. So if you put 100,000 in, and so you're getting $13,942 as your payout. Of that $13,942, dollars, there's a 10% withholding tax, which would be $1,392 in tax. So even if it was below 10%, it's not like it wipes it out. You know what I mean? It's a 10% of the money that you're being paid. Here, let me give you something you can see. What do we got here? What's this? All right, there we. But you can't see what money was taken out there. Let me give you one of the reports. These are actual numbers from the actual clients so that you can see it visually and make it make sense for you. All right, these clients have the bond ladder from last year. So in January, that was the lowest bond that they got. So you see the gross payout on the million Kenyan shillings that they put in was 60,000 Kenyan shillings. There's a 10% withholding tax there. So the 60,000 Kenyan shillings, the tax deduction was 6,000, right? So their net monthly income in that month was 54,000, right? That's above our 50,000 target. The next month, you see that says IFB1. IFB means infrastructure bond, right? So infrastructure bonds are tax exempt. That was the bond that was 18.46%, right? To be exact, it's 18.4607%, right? So same amount of money, mind you, the amount of money invested in the January bond, same amount of money invested in the February bond. Look at the amount of difference. So in February, they got paid 92,303.50, zero taxes because of the infrastructure bond. So they got all of that as their net monthly income. In March, there was an FXD bond, which does have a 10% withholding tax, right? It was 80,000 was their gross payout. It's 10%, so they paid 8,000 in taxes. They got 72,000 in their bank account, right? In April, they had another fixed deposit bond, FXD bond, 69,710 was their gross payout. They had a 10% withholding tax, so the government took 6,971. They got 62,739 of their net monthly income in their bank account. Next month they had the 67,000 based on the interest rate of that month. The 10% deduction was 6,700 because it's 10%. They got 60,300 in their bank account. In June, they had another infrastructure bond, but it had a lower interest rate. So it was 66,075 was their gross amount. It's an infrastructure bond, so there is no taxes. They got the full 6675 in their bank account. So that's the way it works. So even if it's 10%, it's 10% on your money, and then the withholding is 10% of what you got paid on your money. See, so it's not like it wipes it out. It's a much lower number. What's going on, George? How are you? Can I live in Florida. Can I open a bank account in Kenya? Yeah, that's why when we do ladders, right? When we do a ladder, we also do immigration. So even if you don't live here, you'll essentially get, oh yeah, no problem, no problem. You'll essentially get a green card, even though you're not here. And then you can open up bank accounts anywhere you want, right? So it'd be like having a green card in America, even though even though you're not like living there. Now in America, if you have a green card and you don't live there, you lose your green card. But that's an American thing. Right? That law isn't universal. So you would have what's called an ordinary residency permit, probably, unless you want to open a business here. Then we have to do a different permit. But you'd have an ordinary residency permit here in Kenya, and that would allow you to open bank accounts here in Kenya and all of that type of stuff, own cars, own houses, all of that stuff here, if you wish to do that. And then you could still live in Florida. That's fine. Is the 10% withholding tax a final tax? Ooh, you're a tax person. Yes, that's an interesting question that only a tax person would ask. Yes, it's a final tax, right? So that means that there's going to be no additional payments when you file a tax return. Um, Technically, there are a lot of people who do what's called a nil return if this is all they're doing because they've already paid a final tax. So it's almost like registering a blank or a tax return and that being okay because it's a final tax. CPAs don't like that though. They still like to go through the full return. But because it's a final tax, you technically could do that and be compliant. I came in late as you were talking about someone who can't work. Yeah. So there are different permits to be here, immigration wise, rather. Okay, so there are different permits to be here, immigration wise. Some of those permits essentially come with working papers, like from the American, vocabulary of it all. We would call it working papers, right? So some of those permits come with working papers, some do not. The ones that don't come with working papers lead to dual citizenship. So a lot of people who are doing like passport portfolios, or they just want a second passport, or they want to be able to engage with the country as a citizen at some point in time, and then their children inherit that citizenship. They choose the permit that has no work authority, so that 7 years later they qualify for dual citizenship. Right? People who don't care about that can choose different permits. So they can choose a digital nomad permit. They can choose they can't really choose a work permit. You have to be hired by a local company, and the local company has to get you a work permit. So that's a little different. But they can choose like an NGO permit if they're like coming as a missionary or something like that. They can choose an investor permit if they want to open their own business here, and that would give them the right to do that and own a business here, and so on and so forth. So it just depends on what your overall goal is. All right. Hold on one second. I do see that there are 4 other questions in 4 other live streams. Give me just 1 second to answer my wife, the most important woman in my life. Give me just a minute. Okay, I think we're good. I think she has what she needs from me. Okay. All right. Okay. The yield of 8.022% per annum. Yeah. So if it is a yield, if they're calculating yield, it is per annum. And there's a formula for that. It's like market price divided by coupon price times 100 or something like that. But yeah, that's a metric. But yeah, it's per annum. Uh, that's like a that's a wild question that a lot of people ask. You're not alone. There's just no way to answer it. Like what businesses are good for like you know, there's no restrictions. So like in a place like Tanzania where there are restrictions on foreigners, maybe that's a better question to ask, because then there are certain places where foreigners can't own a business. But there are no restrictions here. You don't need local, owners in the business. None of that. So it's really, what are you good at? It's, you know what I mean? It's, I can't give you a list of like, oh, if you do one of these 10 businesses, you'll be successful. It's like, what do you know? What are you good at? Where's your passion? What are you willing to learn? Do you understand that failing forward is part of business ownership? Like it's all of that stuff. Okay, thank you. Hey, no problem. We're always here. You can also do you can do an assessment on our website for free. So there's like a generational wealth assessment, and then one of us will get back to you if you do that assessment. So like somebody will email you. All right, cool. Yeah. What is the? Yeah, it's a formula. It's a formula of how to like rate the bond. It doesn't mean a whole lot if you're not a bond broker, but yeah, it's just a formula. And it changes depending on whether you bought the bond at a premium or at a discount. Most of the time, we buy it's at a discount. That's not something you can control though. That's something that happens if the bond is like oversold or oversubscribed to or like whatever. But yeah. And it does, there is something called yield to maturity, which again is another, it's another formula. They're all like technical formula things. When do they make the most? Well, I guess if you're going to go to the secondary market and try to sell a bond, which you're always going to lose. I've never known anybody to sell a bond on the secondary market and not lose. So people who are selling bonds on the secondary market, they're doing it because they're broke, right? And something crazy happened, right? So like someone's sick, they need brain surgery, something nuts happened, and so they're selling it on the secondary market. That is such a crazy question. What's a better investment between infrastructure bonds and rental apartments? I mean, rental apartments, you're paying a lot of tax. So, from a tax perspective, an infrastructure bond with zero tax is better, but there could be better upside. Like, we have, actually, if those, oh, you can't even see behind me because the bond is up. But for those of you who are on the like Facebook live stream, you can see behind me, right behind those trees, there's some houses that we built for a client that have their, you know, their investor permits and all of that. Those are 4-story, 5-bedroom, 3-story. I'm sorry, 3-story, 5-bedroom houses, each with a private pool. They're very, very nice. They Airbnb for $500 to $700 a night, right? And of course, it's like 12 people in the Airbnb, so they just split it, right? So I mean, is that better than an infrastructure bond? Probably, because they're getting paid in dollars. They're getting $500 to $700 a night. But we live in Deanny. We live in Deanny Beach. You can't do that everywhere, right? There's a place in Lamu Island that's $5,000 a night, right? So like, you know, those are special places that are in special places where you can get the biggest bang for your buck. So, you know, it really just all depends. It's just a question that can't be answered as generally like that. You know what I mean? But if the focus is that you don't want to have a tax liability, then the infrastructure bond is tax exempt. Doesn't mean you're making more money, but it would be objectively better if your focus is not paying taxes. It would be objectively better at not paying taxes than rental apartments would be, right? So it just depends on like what how you're measuring it. No, you don't have to live in Kenya to benefit. It gets a little funky though if you start expatriating. Like if you start taking the money and bringing it back to another country, depending on the rules of that country. If you're American, it's definitely hairy because now you're paying taxes twice because the withholding taxes come out of it before the money hits your bank account. So you're definitely paying the withholding taxes, and that's a final tax. So there's not going to be a way to get that back, right? So now you've already paid your withholding taxes if it's not an infrastructure bond, and then you wire the money to the United States, and then the United States wants to figure out what kind of income that is. You could probably very like legally and realistically say, hey, listen, this is capital gains tax, and show them that you own a bond, and I'm sure they would agree with you, right? If not, they might think it's income tax, which might not be to your benefit. But in any regard, you're probably paying tax at least twice. There may be a state issue that pops up. Like we've seen that with Californians a lot, right? Where there's like the state wants their taxes now, right? And so they're trying to figure out, you know, how did this money come to you? And how are we going to tax that? And so, you know, when you're repatriating the funds and you're trying to make it up on the U.S. side, you can run into additional issues that are affecting your full return on investment. However, American brokerages, and I'm sure that they have their own setup where they send the money to some neutral third country and because they're giant, you know, like J.P. Morgan type giant, right? But American brokerages look at this and they're like, huh, should we have our money in the S&P 500 or should we take $2 million and drop it into this 15% guarantee return for the next 8 years, right? So they don't like to have their money locked up in bonds long term like our clients do because our clients are using the bond payments to live off of. So they're cool with having 20 years of security. They don't want to do all that. But for a short one like this, and even this, it's like almost 9 years. That's even too long for a lot of them. They love though that 18.46% infrastructure bond because it was only, I think it started at 7 or 6 years. It started of 6.5. It issued at 6.5 years because it had so much interest on it, right? So it issued at 6.5 years. They loved that. That was enough. Get 20% of your money guaranteed for the next 6.5 years. They were definitely into that. So and that happened right at the Trump inauguration. So when everybody was unsure of what was going to happen with the economy, uh, that thing popped up overseas where you could go overseas and get almost 20% guaranteed for essentially his entire term. Yeah, they were digging that. So yeah, there's a lot of like American and just foreign investors that will do the math, and maybe they're not getting the 20%, but even after the math they're getting 14, which is good enough, and so they'll go ahead and reach into that. Sure, we've had people like pull money out of like retirement accounts and just pay the 10% with the difference, right? Because if you're living here, if you moved here, you have a bank account here, you also have a debit card with Visa or Mastercard, like the same type of stuff exists here. So when you pay, your taxes, and there's that amount there, you can just pay directly from the account. You don't have to reintroduce the money, right? So you can pay directly from that account. So that becomes a little easier to manage. But you just talk to your local people. Talk to your local people and see, because they got your tax planning down, or even if you don't have a tax planner, you just have somebody who does files your taxes. Just talk to them because they know what your taxes look like. So even at that level, they should be able to be like, this is a huge departure, might trigger an audit. We got to do it this way, blah 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 blah. So just talk to your local professionals. If you don't have a local professional and you're thinking about doing something like this, get one. You know, what if you can't afford a professional? If you can't afford a professional, you can't afford to do it. Seriously, like it doesn't make sense for you to throw all your stuff away. If you can't afford a professional, then you can't afford to do it. We tell people that all the time. We turn people away all the time. They just can't afford it, right? We're not just going to take the last little money you got, you know what I mean, and move forward just because you can afford to pay our invoice when we can see that you just can't. You're not there yet. So having a professional consultation is not a whole lot of money. You're talking about a couple $100 at maximum, right? So if that's scary to you, it doesn't even make no sense. You talking about doing a bond ladder that you can live off of. A bond ladder that you can live off of is gonna be at least like $75,000. So you know what I mean. If you can't, call your local CPA and pay him, $100 for a consultation and figure out, how to do this the right way, you definitely can't afford it. To be realistic with that. You know what I mean? Don't tie up money that you can't afford to tie up, thinking that you'll figure it out, and that money's then tied up for the next 15 years or something like that. Be realistic about that. If you can afford to do it, do it. If you can't afford to do it, work up to it. Yeah, no, no, definitely. And be leery of people who are like willing to take your money before they figure out what's going on with you. For something like this, like if you're, buying cereal at the grocery store, they don't need to know what's going on. You know what I mean? But this is like a multi-year plan, right? Like this is like you're doing something that's going to take a decade to fruition. You know what I mean? So those kind of people need to learn more about you because they're going to be with you for the next 10 years, right? So if they're not acting like they're going to be with you for the next 10 years, then they're probably not intending to be with you for the next 10 years. So go somewhere else. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, you're absolutely right. All right. So, any other questions on that? We have been on this live for 2 hours and 24 minutes. Any other questions on our end of year special or bond ladders? End of year special only has 3 plots left. Yes, we had 8 plots yesterday, and overnight there are only 3 plots left. So if you want the end of year special where everything is tied together, where you get the brand new house built for you, you get the land, you get the immigration done, you get all your tax compliance stuff done, you get the trust fund and the bond ladder, there are only 3 plots left for that. There were 8 yesterday. There are 3 today. So that is going to sell out relatively quickly. So focus on that if that's something that you want. Any other questions? If you're writing a question, just press enter, and I'll wait for you to go and correct. If you're about to send a question up, press 1, put that in the chat, and I will wait for you. Looks like we're good on questions, guys. So I am going to go take my son to breakfast. And that is that. So thank you, guys. Freedom family, you are always a hoot. Great times with you. Love to see you. I am here every day, same time, same place. So you can catch me again tomorrow night. Until we sell out of the end of year special, I'll probably talk about it quite a bit. So we'll talk about bond ladders again. We'll talk about that kind of stuff again until that's gone. And so I will see you guys. Sorry, YouTube. Sorry. I will see you guys tomorrow around the same time, here at the same place, and we will get into it some more. All right. We are set to do 100 families in generational wealth. So set up 100 new generational wealth offshore non-grantor trust funds by the end of this year. That is our commitment to 2026. So you'll hear us talking about that quite a bit. We've done 4 so far. Oh, really? Trevor. Okay, so that's 5. We got so we've done 5 for the year so far. 1 just came in. And so actually we'll go set him up once I get off of this live. And so yeah, we're doing 100 this year. If you want to be part of that, keep your eyes on what's going on here, and you might be one of our next families to build generational wealth in this place. All right, guys, great talking to you. I will see you guys tomorrow, same time. If you come up with a question, just go ahead and ask that question on one of my videos, and you'll either get a response or you'll get a video response. All right, guys, talk to you soon.